Let me start by referring back to Aaron's presentation. He was saying that CEOs around the world and company senior management have realized that the game has changed completely, and that the value created for society and for your employees in all these other ways is just as important as the financial value. So my first question to you is, do you buy into that? And the second question, we can wrap this into one, do you think your shareholders are buying into that? And do you think your senior management is buying into that? Dale?
Yes, we as Siemens worldwide do have this, we are part of, I would say, this movement. Now, I don't know for how many years, but there is a Dow Jones Sustainability Index where we have a very good position. So there is an awareness definitely at the most senior management there. Here in Hungary, we have a different awareness. It started 5.5 years ago, and not from the management level, not from my level, but from Anita's. She proposed this, and we have nice results over the past 5 years. Maybe I can mention one or two later on. And your other question was whether the shareholders like it. This, I don't know, our shareholder base worldwide is so varied. I'm not so sure that the traditional Siemens shareholder puts very much value to this, I must say. But we in Hungary do, so.
And how do you bridge that gap?
We are far away from the shareholder.
Zdravka?
I will use a mic, so I will rely on it. So maybe reflecting back to Dow Jones, just last week as a mall, we found out that we are again on the list, in a row. So I think being that big as mall is and operating across really like 3 continents and 30 countries, we in a way need to safeguard the license to operate. So it is important. It is important for shareholders. There is a way to go, being in our industry as well, but we are doing a lot around it. So it's important not only from customers and employees' point of view, but referring back to our really from the communities and different stakeholders and shareholders. So yes, it is important.
Ágnes?
Thank you. What I see, I just remembered back when I started in HR, it was 18 years ago. So that time the workforce was totally different than now. And I started in a factory. We were producing mobile phones in 24-hour shifts, seven days a week. So it was a totally different business than now, because now I work for a Siemens subsidiary. Evosoft is a Siemens company with 1,600 software developers. So really totally different workforce. And I remember that time the shareholders' interest was bringing the numbers. Now, what we realize that we cannot bring the numbers without people, and people won't stay at the company if they don't have interesting tasks or projects to do. So I think from a different perspective, but this is the interest of the shareholders.
Okay, Nóra?
Same as Tesco. For the first time in June, we have organized our group level so-called ESD day for our shareholders, when we were actually introducing our sustainability and diversity program for our shareholders. And that was the first ever we did. It seems that it will become a regular event. It was very well perceived by our shareholders. And I can just say exactly the same. They actually understand perfectly that numbers are on one side important, of course, but to bring those numbers to life, we need our communities we operate in, we need our colleagues to work with. So yes, our shareholders do actually realize the importance and see the shift.
Just a point of clarification. Just a point of clarification, because when I spoke about you provoked me with the shareholders. So the shareholders definitely have an interest in sustainability, but that is much more than is green, environment, etc., etc. Your question was more focused to, I would now narrow it down to pro bono. I think this is not such an issue yet.
Although I guess it must be an issue, what happens when sustainability starts eating into profits. You know, how committed are shareholders going to be? And Michael, you don't just have responsibility for CSR at KPMG, but because you have a lot of corporate partners, I guess you have good insights into how this works for other companies as well. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'll start with KPMG first, because I think that's we have a little bit different business model. Thank you, because we have our shareholders basically live and work with our people here. I mean, the partner structure, the way we work, is that we're call us the mini shareholders locally, and we care very much what is happening locally and care very much about our people. And you've heard the cliche that basically our assets go home every night, and we need them to come back in the morning because that's our resources. And I think that the interaction with our people is very close. It's very, very tight, and their motivation is critical to our success. So we spend a lot of effort on our people and trying to find out what motivates them, keep them motivated. And I know I've said one advantage, is it an advantage? I guess being older is that you've seen, I mentioned in my initial discussion, was you see how things move. And now I understand why when I was young, the old people were talking about, I remember when. And but there is some truth to that, because as you evolve through your life, sometimes your needs change, your expectations change. But you also see how, as you said, the different generations are having, I think, the different focus. And when I was starting my career, I just wanted a job. I just wanted to get employment. It was a recession time. I didn't care. I mean, I applied for marketing jobs. I applied for accounting jobs, and the accountants called me first. That's why I'm an accountant now. So there wasn't this focus of fulfillment. It was just get a job. That was number one. But now you see, I think the new generation, they're much smarter. I think they're much more aware of the holistic picture and what is important, and the kind of topics that Aaron was bringing up. I think that is the way forward. I don't know how the heck we're going to do it. It sounds I was thinking about, well, how do I do that? How do you actually implement what you're talking about? I mean, that's the challenge, I feel. So we, I'm a mini shareholder, if you want to call it that way, in a local practice, and I have to be very aware of the numbers, because that's what we don't have something we can sell later. We eat what we kill, so to speak. So it's very important to focus on numbers, but then you have to understand where the numbers are coming from, and that's the people and their teams and ourselves, frankly. So we're all in it together, which is, I think, a healthy model, because you haven't got this distance between shareholders and the employees in our model.
And what about other companies that you've got a little bit of an insight into?
Well, I think that this is on the table for all of them. It's interesting that multinationals, I think that Hungary has one advantage from lots of multinationals here, is that the globe has come to Hungary, and a lot of the insights and the trends that are happening globally, companies like Siemens and Tesco and et cetera are bringing here from their home offices, so to speak, or from other parts of the world, and they're bringing those ideas to Hungary. And I'm seeing now with the multinationals, okay, they've got every multinational has some kind of agenda for this kind of activity, and they're replicating it locally too. It's the Hungarian-owned and managed companies that I tend to focus on a bit more and think, well, how are they going to get their insight? Who are they going to learn from? And how are they going to understand why it's important? And I'm finding even there, you're seeing, I just did a very informal survey of a few of my owner-managed Hungarian clients or friends who own relatively big businesses here, Hungarian, and it was interesting. Some of the ones that were much more market-facing, much more focused on this kind of efforts, they were clearly involved in volunteering, had different programs, maybe not quite as advanced in a lot of other multinationals, but clearly they were on track. The ones that were more of the blue-collar focus, manufacturing, much less so. So if they were market-facing, they were much more involved. If they were much more manufacturing and technology-oriented, then less so. But definitely, it wasn't a foreign concept. It was just that they hadn't spent the time on it yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Zdravka, MOL has people, quite a lot of them, in both of these categories. How do you see the value being created inside the company with both the blue-collar and the white-collar workers? And how do you think this might drive actual business performance? Is return on investment something that comes up as a consideration when you build these programs?
Well, let me start to build a bit broader, because we are kind of Hungarian company and we didn't learn from the multinational or the head office somewhere. So basically how we started to develop the whole concept, we said, so we are quite sizable and big enough, being the second largest Central Eastern European player in general. So we can and we need to do and have some impact for sure. And being in our industry, which is now going also a bit beyond traditional oil and gas, because we are entering heavily into consumer services, mobility, car sharing, mobility, so all the, let's say, more sustainable parts which are integrated within our supply chain. So let me focus or narrow down to the volunteering first. We said, so let's see bottom up what we can do. So we asked people in our 12 countries, so where you would like to focus. And we clearly get the link to our communities from Pakistan, etc. So we were building up with more than 100 actions, 50 projects, etc. But in terms of the KPIs and return on investment, I think it's very clear. So we just heard how it impacts the retention, the engagement, and what we need to do. So we started to frame it in terms of the different volunteering ideas, social corporate responsibility ideas. So not to go too much broad, but there are lots of programs where we are focusing, even in the region, if you are talking about the blue collars, to come back on this one, that we clearly see that actually the educational background in the region doesn't meet, so we do not have enough technicians, so the prestige of the technicians is very low. So, for example, in our region where we operate, we have the prestige of the grammar schools, so we are focusing very much on dual education, vocational schools, to give back in a way to the region and to the society, and how it brings back also to our blue collars and bringing the purpose in societal terms. So just to mention some of those.
Thank you. Nóra, how does this work at Tesco?
Well, we just kicked off. So as I mentioned before, we started or rolled out our volunteering program on the 5th of September, so 2 weeks ago, all to our colleagues. So we operate 204 stores in Hungary. We have 2 big distribution centers and a huge head office. So we are talking about around 14,000 active colleagues. So this means every colleague will be able to volunteer 8 hours per year paid by Tesco. This adds up to over 100,000 hours we'll hopefully give back to our communities. But it started very similarly than at Mo. We looked at how our colleagues were behaving, and we saw that, without even the program or the framework set up, many of our store managers and many of our office functions were actually going on volunteering as part of their team building. More volunteering, physical volunteering than pro bono. I think that will be our next step. And also we are working very, very closely with our local communities. So we run a program called You Choose, We Help, through which we help local communities and local causes since 2016. So 2016. And we are doing food surplus donation from 173 stores all across the country. So this means that for our store colleagues, especially helping local communities, working very closely with local NGOs and local causes is extremely important. So through this work, we saw that it wasn't enough for colleagues to only hand over food surplus or actually support with donation, but they actually wanted to do some physical work as well. So I think it was more of an organic development for us at Tesco. So we saw that there was colleagues actually wanted such a framework, and I think it was our job to simply set up something which is very simple, which is not bureaucratic, enabling all these, all across Central Europe. We have 48,000 colleagues, and this framework operates for all of them. And it has to be flexible, easy, and with the minimum administrative burden. And that was the biggest challenge, how to actually set such a system up in a complex world. Head office is different, stores are different, DCs are different. So that was our biggest challenge.
How do you commit resources to this program? Are people volunteering their free time? Is the company paying for their volunteer time? Is the company paying for the things that they need in order to perform these volunteer tasks?
Okay, company pays for 8 hours per year. So far, we have decided we will not pay for anything extra. So we see this is, still we need to trial it. But something very, very, very exciting and interesting happened during the trial. So we ran a trial last year involving 10 stores and our head offices. And we actually did allocate extra hours to the store payroll budget for this pilot period. And it was incredible to see that the extra budget had nothing to do with the intention of colleagues going to volunteer or not. So the way we set up was selected the 10 stores was basically on their previous community performance. So we actually do track how our stores perform, and it was obvious to see. So those stores where actually community work was, or who were active in community work previously, they were actually very active in volunteering, and the stores with absolutely no affluency did absolutely nothing, even though they had extra budget. So actually, when we rolled out the program, we decided that we will not allocate extra budget to the payroll for stores. But of course, we as Tesco pay for, so that 100,000 hours is paid by Tesco.
How does this work at Siemens? And are you still boycotting Sennheiser, or would you like the microphone now?
Not boycotting. Sennheiser's good German, so it's good. If this is better, okay. Well, we started 5.5 years ago, where actually Anita and her colleague then proposed this volunteering. So this was not an initiative which came from, to the best of my knowledge, from Siemens somewhere. Actually, we were, if we're looking at the periphery, we were one of the first. And it was also not an initiative which came from our local management. And coincidentally, today we have a little formal meeting, which we have twice a year, and this is why I also happen to have the numbers here. So over the past 5 years, so we have a very nice mix of where it's time, paid time within the company, and time outside. We're tracking this. Percentage over the past 5 years happens to be 47-53. I'm not saying in which favor because it's quite irrelevant, because it's basically half-half, which I think is a good sign. What we do commit is we have a central coordinator. So we pay for, in this case, her. She does a very, very good job. We were getting, at some point in time, more motivating emails from them than from some other entities, and we said, tone it down a little bit. They have someone who comes up with great logos for the activities. So we have three main activities. So it's social responsibility and help. The other one is kids and youth. And the third one is environment. Those are the 3 pillars which we decided here locally. This has a nice track record over the past 5 years. So as you mentioned, Evosoft belongs to us up in the consolidated heaven in Munich. But they have a different focus because they have 1,600 software developers. And this is where you can get more pro bono work, which you are also concentrating on, out of the remaining of the Siemens group. So that's 2,200 and 1,600. We're very basically blue-collar heavy. We have about, out of the 2,200, we have about 1,600, 1,700 blue-collar-ish, or, I mean, blue-collar is wrong. It's factories. Of course, they also have white-collar. So our focus is less on pro bono. You tried that. It didn't really work. And it was already mentioned that there's a difference in blue collar and in white collar, if I may put that, which we also feel. So we have different programs. We do cooperate a little bit, which is also good because there's always a spillover, which has also actually strengthened over the last year or so.
Thank you, Zdravka. I think I saw you wanted to make a comment before.
I want to build on the frameworks that we are enabling, and I think it's important, especially in terms of the senior leadership and also as the function as human resources. So very, very practical thing that we did, basically, that we lobbied for years, that as a part of our collective agreements, we actually give the 1 day for the volunteering, and we implement it actually in Hungary and Croatia, which are sizable operations. So 20,000 people, including blue collar, have a chance to volunteer once per year on behalf of the company. So this way, I think we are also showing the clear enablers and the framework how we are going to do it for 20,000 people. And maybe to build in terms how it was built up from within. So it always needs to be kind of joint working between sustainable development team, HSE, HR, of course, and communication. So that's how we build it in, and we got all the angles and the aspect to boost it. But there is always a need for the framework, very particular framework, which in our countries and in our region, the collective agreements, etc., is giving. And it was not easy at the beginning, but we came to the point in the last 5 years. So I think it's a big achievement which management needs to drive.
Ágnes, coming down from the consolidated corporate heaven of Siemens, I'm guessing that the realities in Hungary are a little different at Evosoft and Siemens itself. How does it work for you guys?
So it's, as I mentioned earlier, retention is our number one focus, really, because in Hungary, software market, job market is really, I don't say a tragedy, but it's coming close to that. So it's not easy to keep... Challenging, right. Very much challenging, I would say. So it's not easy to keep people. And what we see is that they need a purpose. And also, I asked last summer, so I joined the company 2 years ago, and last summer I asked the entire organization, so what do you think, what are the things we could do for you so that you have a workplace where you really enjoy to come every day to work for us? And they said many things, among others, free beer every day. But they also said that we would like to do more CSR type of activities. And they said that, okay, we are teaching at the universities already, which is great. We are acting in painting walls in a hospital or kindergarten or etc. But we want to do something extra. We would like to utilize our know-how, our brain, and in that way to help others, which was a big task for us. So, okay, how do we find organizations where who need help in IT type of work? We didn't really know anything about that. And that's the way how we actually came across András, and we started to cooperate with ÖKA, and now actually we are having 2 programs or projects, I would say, where we help organization. For one of them we are developing database, for the other one a website. And what we see is that this is like adding another layer on top of all the other CSR type of activities. And this is really something unique we have now on the software market at the moment, and people really love to do that in our company.
Thank you. How do you create visibility for these types of activities, both inside and outside the company? Is outside visibility important at all? And how do you give recognition internally as well, so that people don't just have the fulfillment of having created value, but also feel recognized for having done so? Michael?
Well, I think this links to, a few points that were made, which are very relevant. It's how do you, in a corporation, in a kind of business, how do you structurally build this into the system? I like the idea, we do the same, we do something similar, that you give people 8 hours, everybody gets 8 hours. You actually put it in the collective bargaining agreements. That's fantastic. We give people 3 to 5 days for this kind of thing, because we're like you, we try and sell brain power, etc. So I think trying to build it into the system. We also have a program, we call it the Creators, CR, capital CR, Creators program, where our employees can actually kind of bid or put in an application to have a volunteering or some kind of activity, which when we will co-fund or we'll fund as KPMG. We have a budget allocated for it, and we will help them with that. Like we do engagements, we're very time-based. Everybody has timesheets. And we another program where we allow pro bono activities, so value-based or skill-based, volunteering. And because to link it to our KPIs, every manager, call it, who manages projects, is evaluated on their projects. They have revenue targets, they have cost, etc. But then we've allocated created a budget so that they can actually receive credit for pro bono activities in their KPIs. So that it's not the same profitability, it's a much lower percentage, but still they're getting credit for doing a pro bono activity. But then when they have their discussion at year end to talk about their goals and they're reaching their goals, they will actually get credit financially for these activities they perform. So it's built into the system, and that and even in their goal setting, it's also now a big instigation of Szabó István, who most people know in the room, as my driving force of our CR activities in Hungary. It's now built into their goal setting as well. So yeah, everybody has a goal set at the beginning of the year, and part of the goal setting can be a pro bono type activity.
And is there any internal visibility for people's pro bono results, either locally or globally within KPMG?
Well, we have. We report some global reports done. But I think internally, if I think about it, we have a few programs. We have the KPMG Way, and where people are nominated, staff are nominated annually to receive a reward for embodying KPMG values, which we have a number of values, which leading by example and integrity, etc. And part of that, people are getting recognition for pro bono or volunteering activities as well. It certainly helps their visibility internally. And we have CR newsletter. We have the traditional newsletters, etc. We always wonder how many people actually read them, but we do have newsletters. So we've had communications to try and spread the word that here's what we're doing, here's the person leading it, etc.
Zdravka, how does this work at Mall?
So as I already
musical microphone.
As I mentioned, we started with the volunteering idea competition, which was a very good tool and a framework to generate. So we had thousands of applications actually, and at the end 50 projects which involved more than 1,000 people won. So it was, I think, per se enough that it boosted the internal kind of spread and communication in terms of how important and relevant it is, and people really find the purpose. What we did beyond this, actually, that we measured, and then we asked with internal survey people how they felt. So we had pretty good sample of 600 people who actually told us that after this involvement and volunteering actions that they did, that 80% of them would do it again, would talk really positively about the company. So back to your point, that they really feel fulfilled and that they really increase their ability to work within the team, which was like beyond engagement clearly. And they said that more than 90% of them that they will clearly do it, volunteer again, and involve other colleagues to positively influence them to be part of the volunteering. So we had pretty hard KPIs and facts to convince also the senior management. So we dedicated a decent budget, so they were supported. And what I think is more important in order to close, let's say, this triangle is really to partner with the professionals such as UKA, so that we have really professional expertise how we are going to do it for the big projects. And the third aspect also from the HR angle, let's say, to recognize the best. So we were doing in terms of this triangle, and it was very, very successful. So I would recommend it as an approach.
Nóra, recognition and visibility.
Well, we were mentioning and talking about colleague engagement or fulfillment a lot, but you also asked about the external world, whether it's important that we get recognition for what we do. I think, yes, of course, especially, again, retail sector, you all know the labor market challenges we face, so it is important that we differentiate ourselves. But at the same time, I do feel, and this is not only related to volunteering, but to all community work, and not only to what we do, but I think for what we all do, it's very, very difficult to get external recognition. and it's very, very difficult to actually really get proper media coverage for the good things we do. And I think this is something, a huge challenge we all we all work against, and we need to figure out at one point together how to challenge the current media approach.
Okay, I can't resist asking the question, being a recovering journalist myself. What is the problem with the media approach in your view? I mean, I think I know what you mean, but I'm not sure everybody in the room does. And how would you suggest fixing it?
I think it's more, my issue is, and this is not Tesco, but let's say food waste, okay? It is close to us, but food waste is a general issue. It's not a Tesco or a retailer phenomena. To get attention from media to actually cover this issue, it's extremely difficult. And of course we are working on it, but what I do believe that there are certain topics which, should receive much more attention from media and journalists.
Would anyone like to comment on that particular point?
Maybe I'd like to add from Evosoft point of view that we decided to communicate only internally, so that people know, because we just started this activity, so that and we decided to launch every year 2 programs, pro bono programs, so that we have more and more people joining this activity, and we don't want to communicate it externally or outside the company, because we would like to have, maybe that's a too ambitious goal, but we would like to have our employees to be ambassadors who are actually bringing more and more people on board. So that's the way how we want to measure it, and we don't want to go for the external communication.
Okay. Yes, of course you can.
Can I just add something to our colleagues as volunteers? This is actually what we did when we rolled out the program. So during the pilot, we actually asked our colleagues to, tell us your story, and then we used their stories when we were launching the program, and it really works well. Probably that's the best way to do it. To see a fellow colleague enjoying and having a great time and really coming back emotionally fulfilled from volunteering. That's the best way to engage the rest of the team. So it really works well for us.
I'm grateful that you mentioned stories, because I think the best way to wrap up in a few minutes will be to ask all of you to share a story. But before we do that, Dale, you had a comment.
Yeah, because the one was external communication. Maybe I'm the problem there, because when we started the whole thing, I said this should not be seen as a special gimmick or so of Siemens, and I don't want that our colleagues who volunteer and take their time, that they're being, I would now be very brutal and say, a little bit misused for the company image. So I was quite particular about separating this kind of activity and communicating this from our normal communication. And maybe an idea, which could be already a story, and that the internal communication. So we have these SÖK, Siemens Önkéntes Közösség, they organize 3 events a year. One is the Oktoberfest, which is quite popular, Farsang, and then we have Bogrács Főzés. So who needs a Hungarian translation? There, some others will help, English translation. And they organize this, and the people who have, and everyone is invited from within the group, but they have to pay a little bit. It's either 1,500 or 2,000 forint, and that money is then given to them. So it is their event, and the proceeds of this, because we finance it as a company, at the end is given to them, and with that, then they can also have additional funds. So this is a little bit of internal promotion, and of course these events are good because engaged people get together. There is beer, yes, quite a bit of it, and good communication, and that is very strong also internal promotion.
Thank you very much. So that's very important. Moral of the story: beer fixes everything, almost. we're running out of time, so we have one last round. A personal story from each of you, whether it has to do with a time when you engaged in a volunteer opportunity yourselves, or whether it has to do with colleagues, or how this was launched at your company. That's up to you. But we're looking for anecdotes, engaging stories about fulfillment.
First. Well, I probably won't be as inspiring stories as what Aaron could tell, but I think what happened was when I realized how powerful this can be. Is I thought about volunteering as the classic, the oval dome. You you do a crappy job painting the walls of a kindergarten, versus the skill-based and actually going out to the community. And what we have, and we have a couple programs where we actually have NGOs apply for a combination of services, what they decide what they need, cash and laptops, etc. So it's been very successful, and just seeing the amount that we had, 100, 200 applications sometimes, it's just really mind-boggling, and the effort put in, and then talking to our people after they've performed on these engagements, and just their eyes were bright and they're so excited and fulfilled. It's really just made me open my eyes on how important this is and how powerful it can be. And I always tell people at KPMG, like we hired university graduates, they train with us, and most of them leave at some point in their career. So we have a very, very important role and powerful role, I believe, that I always tell the people, look, I don't know any of my KPMG colleagues who I grew up with at KPMG who have left who aren't doing something interesting somewhere. They're all successful somehow. Somehow they're all successful. It depends how you measure success, of course. Going to NGOs or going to the corporate sector. So I realize how much of a catalyst we can be. That if they grow up with us, learn the family values, etc., and then they spread the word. And that's what I find. I get people, ex-colleagues calling me and say, hey, Mike, I heard you're the CR partner. Can you give me some ideas? And that's what I find inspiring and nice.
So I mentioned that this started 5.5 years ago with by Anita and another colleague, and we supported that because it was very well prepared, and we also sometimes just support things because we think they're good. However, every month I try to meet 2 new colleagues who enter the company from each of our sites, and when one of those new colleagues told me how good it was and how motivating for him that we have this kind of volunteering program where we can give all of this which we were talking about, then I realized, honestly speaking, for the first time that, wow, this really has additional value. So this was an eye-opener for me, and also some eye-opening today for me as well today. Thank you.
Zdravka.
Well, my personal story, I will start really early. So my father is a doctor, so he's a general practitioner who has practiced for 55 years. So I started very early with him in kind of homes for abandoned children. And I transferred somehow to my daughter, who is like 21 and young volunteer for more than 15, 16 years already. So on a personal note, and my father is still working, he's 80, and he's still working pro bono as general practitioner, so it's somehow embedded in the family. I was the only one who was not medical doctor, so I need to give back in a way because I decided to be economist. So this is more on a personal note. On a more professional life note is that I did a lot of skill-based volunteering, really, especially in Croatia, with the Bureau for Unemployed People in terms of helping with CV, with interviews. So I did it for years, that time with Coca-Cola, and it was very, very, very fulfilling. So I'm still in contact with many of those. So those are, let's say, 2 aspects.
Thank you. Ágnes.
So my personal story is that working in HR is always like you sit on the other side, which means that organizing CSR activities is a task, actually. So it's, it's not easy to live that because you are organizing that. So that's why I decided, okay, I want to try it on my own. I also want to feel that feeling what others feel when they are doing it. So what I did is I'm a hiker. I love mountains. I love forest and so on. And I was like, okay, that's also a skill. I know the forest. So what can I do with this? So I decided to organize tours in the elementary school of my sons to pass over this feeling to the kids, to the really small kids, so how it is to be out in the nature once a week, not bringing any kind of equipment with you, but just to be out there and to know the forest, to listen to the sound, and so on and so on. So I started to organize one hike a month for the children, and I realized, though it was a huge task to organize that and to collect 12, 14 kids, which are like 6, 7, 8 years old. But it was so fulfilling. I was in flow for the whole activity, and it gives me energy for the other 3 weeks until I start the other one. So it's my recommendation would be try it yourself, and then you really understand what it means, and then it's easier to organize it.
Nóra?
I fully agree. My story, I think, is more professional, but in a way funny, because actually I did volunteer to set up this volunteering framework for the 4 CE countries, and it was a real challenge because I run the comms team in Hungary. This is very much related to the people team, to HR, so it was a very, very complex and challenging task. But now that we have launched it, the most personal feeling I have is the fear, because this is like huge scale, so we can make really, really great impact. And my biggest, I would say, this is like emotional, that I don't want to miss that chance. So I want us as a company and us as 48,000 colleagues to actually really, really take everything out of this opportunity, personally as well. So not only as a company, but also personally. So for me, this is my sort of personal, emotional relationship to volunteering now.
Well, thank you very much to our guests and panelists, but please don't go far. We're doing this event Hungarian style, which means that there isn't a formal Q&A, because we don't tend to like that very much in Hungary, do we? People never ask any questions, and then they catch the panelists outside the room and ask all their questions then. So we build this into the concept. Do stay for lunch. There's plenty of questions in the air. There's a lot yet left to discuss, and I'll leave Michael to make the final comment. All I have to say is come and join us for brunch. Ask your questions. Use the opportunity. There's a lot of experience in this room. Let's make the best of it.
Just a final point, which actually I should have said at the beginning, but I know that we're in this kind of environment. I know you'll forgive me. But I just wanted to thank the Harish family for making this space available to us and helping to make this an easier process to organize. So I just wanted to thank them as well for the beautiful location, and so thanks to the Harish family.